give me a minute, would ya? This is not easy. This video is sponsored by the good people at Movavi. The biggest part of actually pulling off this effect is making sure that you understand what it is you're trying to create before you film. I filmed all of this with my mobile device. In the first shot, I had it mounted into a tripod, and I just got down on my knees and jumped up into the air. Poor old Daniel with no vertical leap. The second shot, I stayed on the ground, and I had my girlfriend Megan take the entire tripod and camera and whip it up into the air and point it into the sky. This was the entire shot that I had in my head. Me flying off and the camera trying to track me as I shot off like a rocket. The next thing I needed to do from here was get to the point in the first piece of footage right where I came off of the ground. Right about there. Now what I did was I right-clicked on that piece of footage and added a marker into my timeline. That lets me know exactly where I jumped off the ground. Next, in the upper right, right under the preview window, I took a snapshot of that frame and I saved it onto my computer. I opened up that snapshot in my photo editing software, and then all I did was I cropped out the background using a Smart Select tool. Now this doesn't have to be very perfect, and you'll see why. Once I had it roughly there, I just inverted my selection and I erased all of the background. Let me just clean up some of the edges here, and that'll be more than enough to do what I need. Now I'm gonna do a couple things to this rough cutout to make it work a little better in our final project. The first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stretch it out, because my thought is if you're jumping up in the air, it's gonna seem like the body's getting elongated as it flies up quickly. So let me stretch that out a little bit. I'm gonna add a little bit of blur to this to replicate a little bit of motion blur. Once that's all done, I'm going to export this as a PNG file to make sure that I retain the transparency. Now back inside of Movavi, I'm going to import that blurred jump. Now right here in the timeline where I left that marker, I'm gonna bring that down and put it into a track above my original footage. Now as you can see as I move forward, you'll start to see that blurred jump overlaid on top of my original footage. Because I stretched it out, my foot's a little bit lower. Let me left click on that blurred jump in my timeline, and in the upper left under the video editing tab, I'm gonna scroll down to animation. I'm going to choose the upward animation and bring that down right onto my clip. If I left click on that first keyframe, now in the upper right, I can left click and hold, and I can make a slight adjustment to where that piece of footage sits. And I'm gonna overlay it right on top of that jump so that my foot lines up. I'm gonna move a few frames forward, and in the upper left, I'm going to add another keyframe, and I'm going to move that completely out of shot. So as I play, you'll see that my blurred image now jumps out of shot, but I still have me landing on the ground. What I'm gonna do is go right back to where that marker is. I'm going to select the track below it, and I'm going to split that lower footage right here. I'll select the second half, and I'm going to delete that footage. So now it transitions right from where I'm jumping up, and the minute I come off the ground, it switches over to the other blurred footage of me flying upward. Now the biggest problem I have here that I'm seeing immediately is my slow jump doesn't really match everything else flying out. So I'm gonna try helping this out. You see how slow I am coming off the ground and then it flies up? So let's do this. On that first piece of footage, let's go right to where I start jumping up. Maybe right about here. And let me split that footage. I'm going to left click on the second half, and I'm going to speed this up so the whole portion from me coming off the ground and jumping into the air seems like I'm doing that much faster. Let's bring that up by something like 300%. Let me move my other pieces over. And now I have a smoother jump into the sky. I'd like that to go a little bit quicker, so I'm gonna bring that keyframe back a hair to make sure that when I jump up and the camera just starts going into the air, that it really seems like I fly out of scene quickly. I can split my footage there and move the second half out of the way. Now I want to use that second half to do something else. Right after I sort of go out of frame from the camera and the camera pans up, I want to see if I can reintroduce myself much higher in the air and the camera's finally catching up to me, spotting me way up in the stratosphere. Let me go to the video editing tab and add a keyframe, putting the playhead right at the beginning, and let me bring that back down. Now I want to shrink this quite a bit because I want to make it look like I'm very high up in the sky. So I'm going to shrink that way, way down. And I'm going to rotate it and make it seem like right when the camera gets above the trees, you start seeing me come back into frame. And then as we move forward and the camera moves off to the side, I'm going to add another keyframe. I'm going to rotate myself off to the right, and I'm going to move that all the way off to the side out of frame. And now as I scroll through, it should look like I am jumping up, taking off, the camera catches up, and there I am flying through the air and out of frame. I might push that back just a touch. I'd like to rotate my body just a bit, so I'm going to go about halfway. I'm going to add another keyframe right there, and I'm just going to rotate this a tiny bit to make it seem like I'm heading off in that direction. The other thing I want to do is to use audio to create a soundscape so that flying from the ground really sounds impactful. I mixed 6 or 7 different audio sounds together to create that taking off whoosh effect. Let me bring that down into my timeline and right underneath my footage. I'll line that up so that whoosh really starts to happen right where I jump. And I'll even bring down another audio effect that's just the sound of crickets and birds in the background to really match this feeling of being outside. The only other thing I'm noticing is while I'm up in the air, I look a little bit too crisp. So what I'm going to do is double left click on that footage, and in the upper left, I'm going to dial back the opacity. That'll make it feel a little less crisp and almost like I'm flying in and out of some of those cloud layers. When I run this back from the beginning and play it, you'll see how all these elements come together. If you want to learn more video editing tips, tricks, and techniques, or download Movavi and start using it today, I'll put links down below. Peace.